This podcast was recorded at the American headquarters of the Aetherius Society, located in Hollywood, California, where service is the jewel in the rock of attainment.
So let's introduce our... Who are you? Who are we?
I'm Brian.
I'm Richard. Yes. Just checking.
Thanks for coming to help us with these podcast lessons. And today is the fourth in the 9 freedoms, and this is enlightenment. And this is a big change from the first 3. I think at least those of us who are honest with ourselves, we're working on the first 3. Bravery, love, service. These are the steps that we're currently working on. And everyone who's on the path really are working on these 3 big, important steps. But the next 3, enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, and ascension, are kind of like the senior school freedoms. And we kind of look up to those, and we are preparing ourselves to go through those freedoms. But we really aren't there. But if we look at this particular freedom in depth, we can start to see how we can really focus on the first 3 freedoms. And again, Mark chapter 6 puts a very nice, simple way of looking briefly at these 3 first freedoms. And of course, bravery overcomes fear. Love overcomes hate. Service overcomes selfishness. And the one we're on now, enlightenment, overcomes ignorance. And that's a real easy way to kind of remember it and put it into order. Before we get too much into enlightenment, though, we do have one very good question. Several questions, but we have time for one very good one from the podcast land. And that's from last week, the freedom service. And this is the question. How important is it to detach or let go of the result of your service? That's a very, very good question. And Master King tells us that one of the secrets, one of the real tricks, if you will, of love, healing, and prayer is to detach. That is a big, big secret. Is if you're going to be doing a prayer, you say the prayer, give it all you've got, put everything you can into it, and then detach from it. Same with healing. If you're giving healing to somebody, give healing as deeply and as powerfully as you possibly can, and then detach. And that detachment is showing that within you, you know that this will work. It has to work by law. It has to work. The prayer has to work. The healing has to work to one degree. And we know that service is love in practical action. And so it's the same thing. If you're giving service, however you're going to give that service, you give it to the best of your ability, and then you detach. You let the fruits of the service go. And of course, we know from karma yoga, it's very important to not look for appreciation, or not look for people to thank you for what you're doing. You're giving service to God, and you want to help the person as much as you possibly can, but you aren't looking for them to thank you. So it's a very good question, and it is a very important point, a very important secret, is to detach, let the fruits go.
In love, we have seen miracles performed in this country and throughout the world. And I was talking with Brian this week, again, that it would be nice to put together some statistic, some data which is always good to use as a measurement. And the world has, in the last 4 decades, experienced an enormous mortality decrease as a result of severe weather. There are a number of reports that I discovered researching this on the internet, and it's interesting to note that as of 1980, in particular, when the Saturn mission commenced, the Saturn mission, to those of you out there, it is a special mission that was presented to the Master King in 1981, and essentially it is a mission in which specialized energies are collected, are transmitted rather, and placed into a battery. This battery, which is now a storehouse of unique spiritual energies, is taken over a psychic center of the Mother Earth, and then it is dispersed through a cooperative system in which extraterrestrials are taking the energy from the battery and interlacing it and dispersing it into the finer actions and workings of the psychic center. That the battery is now on a boat, the energy is being released and melding in with the psychic center's energies, and it disperses throughout the entire planet.
It's important to note that it's on the outpouring of the energy from the psychic center. Of course, psychic centers both go in and out, but in this particular mission, these energies are mixed, intermingled with the energy going out of the psychic center. One of the side effects that was told about this unique mission, the Saturn mission, is that 90,000 lives were saved from death or severe mutilation from the action of a single phase, the Saturn mission. Now, if we look at statistics, going back to love energy, because it's all about energies, spiritual energies. Going back to the 80s and into our current day, as of 2006, we have a severe, it's a wonderful statistic, by the way, a severe drop in mortality, in death rates, in circumstances where there's vast tornadoes, huge tornadoes that rip through countrysides, and not only dance around, but actually rip through towns, and people's lives are completely saved. Somehow they're standing, and this has been reported many, many times, where they're standing in their living room and the tornado rips through their home, and somehow they're in a cocoon, wrapped in a cocoon of some sort, and they're protected. Families, seniors, this may what age, and this is all across the world. In particular, recently, in the large storms that came through the Midwest, 1,000 miles was affected by these storms that ripped through Texas and up through Nebraska, and as you read, into the Midwest. And many, many lives were saved. Why? We go back, and always go back, to spiritual energy. We always go back to these unique qualities of the cosmic masters, how much love they have for this planet, and how truly they've impacted us. We're talking about floods, we're talking about tornadoes, we're talking about hurricanes. Just one statistic before we move on. In 1980, there was a drought, and 10,000 deaths were the result of this drought. 10,000 people died. And then from 1983 to 2006, only in America, by the way, only 12,434 people were killed, approximately. That was from 1983 to 2006. That's significant. That's 23 years. 1 year, 10,000, 23 years, 12,000. Look at the difference in the deaths that are being saved, or the lives that are being saved. It's fantastic. We're in an age of miracles. So I wanted to bring that up because it is a demonstration of divine love in its wonderment being enacted on this world, and we just so happen to be a part of this great history being written for our world. Very nice.
So, now that we are here,
should we start with the pronouncement?
Yes, let's start tonight with our glorious cosmic master, Mars Sector 6. However, we have a question.
Pre-question.
Yes.
Can we have a little recap of last week?
Last week, of course, is the freedom of service. And service is love in action, love in practical action. And that really is the keynote in these days. That's the most important point to pull out of that freedom is we are being told in these days that it's no longer time to go into the mountains and try and raise yourself up, but it's important to come into the cities, into the population areas, and give service as best you're able. Now, that really is the key point. And in doing that, you will raise the Kundalini and you will go forward and advance in a very natural, unforced manner. That's the essence of service, last week's lesson.
We
Well, of
learned
course, the advantage of the podcast is you can always go back and listen to the lesson again.
as the Master Mars Sector 6, and read quickly for you, the greatest yoga is service. The greatest religion is service. The greatest act is that act done in service. That's last week. That's pretty much right where we're at right now.
Service it really is the jewel. And he described it as the jewel in the rock of attainment. And it's, you can do nothing better these days on earth than serve. Good question.
Yes.
Well, let's push on. This, like I say, is the senior class now, Enlightenment, the first of the three senior classes. And let's start, Mark, with extract number 1, which is, let's first of all get ready, prepare ourselves to feel the energy and the power from this great master. It's a very short extract, so let's try and really grab it, grab the energy and the power. Just close our eyes. Just slow the breathing. Just think for a moment. Expand your mind beyond Earth. Float up above this beautiful green and blue planet of ours. Just imagine for a moment a floating satellite up there, floating around the Earth, giving love and energy and power. And from one of the preeminent masters, Mars Sector 6, has this to say about freedom number 4. Mark?
The fourth freedom will be enlightenment.
Now I will read a couple of sentences after that. Freedom from ignorance can be brought about by all terrestrials who are willing to expend sufficient energy to bring this elevated state into being. There is but one major sin upon Terra. That is ignorance. It might be good, before we get too far into enlightenment, is to have a think of what is the definition of, first of all, enlightenment. We know what service is, we learned what love is, and we know what bravery is. But what's enlightenment? Enlightenment is a term that's been used throughout the centuries in different ways by different religions. And in this text, enlightenment is basically the early stages of meditation. It's when you raise the Kundalini up to the third eye. That's, in essence, the definition here of enlightenment. And then next, Let's find out what ignorance is.
We haven't thought about ignorance, and it becomes more than apparent that there are many guises to ignorance. There are many forms and masks of ignorance. And it's displayed through our daily lives and throughout the world, and it is very important to recognize it. There is an interesting analogy with ignorance regarding, for instance, our being ignorant of our divinity on a day-to-day basis, moment to moment, that we are divine beings living on a divine planet, a divine solar system, in a divine cosmos. That being said, living that day-to-day is a very challenging way of life, and ignorance plays a role in us not realizing and acting in that light 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And one of the interesting things about ignorance is that its sister is indolence. And indolence is the non-caring. I don't care about the people across the world. I don't care if I'm a God spark. I care only about my troubles and my needs and my wants. That is an indolent behavioral pattern which sets up the continuance of ignorance. I ignore it's almost as if we put a callous shield around our divine being, our illumination. We create a shield that prevents the finer forces of nature to enter in. We create an ossification of our beautiful chakras, these jewels in our aura, to vibrate and to revolve and spin and to glow. It becomes diffused. They become ossified. They become dead. And it's no wonder why we don't have brilliant flashes of more illumination, why we don't have day-to-day outstanding mystical experiences. Why? Because we are ignorant. Enlightenment dawns upon those who adopt, as we'll learn today, the wonderful simplicity of God, that we are part of this wondrous, divine, simple. So ignorance is the exact opposite of enlightenment. Just as Brian pointed out from last week, we learned that the opposite of service is selfishness. The opposite of love is hate. And the opposite of bravery is fear. So you combine fear, hate, selfishness, and ignorance, you have the world's history encapsulated right there in 4 words.
And its future, unless people can learn the freedom and enact the freedom. Now, did you want to read that extract about...
Yes, we have an extract from a holy work, which we've introduced, and we'll be introducing a little bit more throughout these forthcoming freedoms. And it is one of the first major books, if not the first major book, written by Dr. George King, entitled You Are Responsible. And it was first published in May of 1961. And I'm referring to a chapter which is entitled Cosmic Logic. And the Master Aetherius, one of the chief communicators from Interplanetary Parliament, speaking to Earth, decided to present us with these wondrous truths. And I'm taking just a little segment of these precious pages and hoping that it brings to light a little great light, rather. So, the Master Aetherius. The very fact that you were interested enough to come tonight proves the stirring of conscience within you. Heed it and let it be your guide, your teacher, your illuminator, and you cannot go wrong. You can lead the world from the dark chaos that your atomic scientists and your materialists have put it into, up to the shining light of bliss, which is so wonderful as to be beyond all description. Surely, you would not sit with your foot in a naked flame. You would move yourself away if you could. Why sit shivering in the cold darkness of ignorance, which you yourselves have fabricated for yourselves, when you have only to raise your mind to that thing, that indescribably beautiful thing, that real thing, that true thing, that flame, that inspiration, that wisdom, that love, that perfection, which is within your very souls at this very moment. That is a part of this wonderful, wonderful book that we recommend all of you if you have the inclination to acquire and study. You are responsible. A very subtle title. By Dr. George King. Yes. Available here at the headquarters and throughout the Aetherius Society, sold in all our headquarters and branches, as well as online.
Now, shall we go on to extract 2? This is really where Mars Sector 6 gives us the real kernel of this freedom. Let's again prepare ourselves. And again, it's very short. This one's about 1 minute and 15 seconds. But it gives the real essence of this freedom. Mark, number 2.
A bravery, a dispensation of pure love, a service. These attributes can help the aspirant to bring enlightenment into being. Enlightenment is a result of the controlled application of specific energies and procedures towards a predetermined end.
Now, there's a lot in there. So I just want to bring a few points out. He says bravery, pure love, and service can help the aspirant to bring enlightenment into being. But that's not all there is. These are the first steps, and it's kind of a prerequisite. But he says there's more. He then says enlightenment is a result of the controlled application of specific energies and procedures towards a predetermined end. The predetermined end, of course, is enlightenment. But the energies and procedures, he goes into the next few paragraphs, and he mentions 3 main energies, and that is physical, mental, and psychic. So he says you need to focus your physical energies in a certain way according to the laws of God. And so you follow the commandments, you don't kill, you try and help people in the physical structure. That's important. And then you also do the same mentally. So you control your mind. Your thoughts have great effect, which we learned before. Negative thoughts will bring people down. You try and control your mind to uplift through prayer, healing, and being positive and helpful and uplifting and teaching. And then he goes into the psychic energies, the psychic aspect. And Dr. King will go into that a little bit later on himself. but it's talking here specifically about harnessing the great pranas that come from the sun. And you harness these and you use them in different ways. One way, of course, is breathing exercises. And there's many other ways too. But these are the three main aspects that you then start to really hone in on and focus on. All the while, the most important aspects are, of course, bravery, love, and service. But then while you're doing that, you're also honing in and really focusing your physical mind, structure, actions, your mental, your thoughts, and then your psychic, which is harnessing the pranas, through deep breathing, etc. So that's the essence, and we're going to kind of pause here and spend most of the class really talking about these two sentences in different ways.
There's been many people who are psychic sufficiently, and being psychic, by the way, doesn't mean that you're spiritually advanced. It means that you have an operating chakra with certain abilities to perceive. Maybe not understand what you perceive, but you can see. However, there's enough evidence, and there's certain wonderful books out there, Annie Besant and Leadbeater and other people who have written books on thought forms. And when you look at this segment of this fourth freedom on the mental man, then we learn very much that the thoughts that we possess really shape and mold our life. They can be constructive or destructive. And primarily, they end up being illusionary. If you really look at your thought pattern, as we should, we find that we have images we create with our God-given abilities, and we set them out into the wondrous tapestry of God's fantastic world. And in that, on many planes, it sets into motion, and the Master has mentioned this, it sets into motion a series of events. And you become to wonder, if you start to think a thought so often, that it actually comes into reality. Circumstances, desires, if you think about something that you want, and you think it enough, and you desire it enough, then the circumstances come in life to you. And you have that which you desire, which you've thought about. Now here the Master, Mars Sector 6, is advising us strongly from vast experiences, wisdom that is beyond, that we need to control our mental picturizations and use them. And he specifically says that mental man can so control his picturization that he can direct his mental energies towards a goal, which is an all-wise constructive, a goal of service, of spiritual cooperation. Spiritual cooperation. A great beam of creative controlled mental energy can be directed towards all terrestrials, so that those ready will be mentally transmuted by this constructive, creative beam of energy. Think about it. Think about what he just said to us. He just said to us that a great beam of creative, controlled mental energy can be directed towards all terrestrials, so that those ready will be mentally transmuted. We don't have to visit India. We don't have to visit any part of the world. We can actually send each and every one of us, individually or more powerfully, cooperating together as a band of brothers and sisters, and send a great beam of collective power and mentally transmute.
Well, the point is, too, that you're sending these energies out anyway. And so it's important to focus these energies in the right way. Because if you don't do it in the way Mars Sector 6 says that you should, then it's going to be, at the best case, gray or neutral, at the worst case, bringing other people down. Perhaps inadvertently, but bringing other people down. And so we have to be thinking anyway. So it's important to keep our thoughts up. Even if you are feeling down, and this may seem like an odd thing, I know certain psychologists and whatnot say, let it all out. You know, if you're feeling bad, just let it go. But that's not always the best case. Sometimes you can act happy, you can act pleasant, and it will help bring you up and then bring other people up too. I mean, if you think about it a little bit, if you're acting happy, even though maybe you aren't happy, but if you're acting happy, those around you will kind of respond in a positive way, and it will then help you lift yourself up.
One of the things in the early days when I first joined the staff of the Aetherius Society, I was very troubled by my inefficiency and my inexperience.
That was just back then?
That was just yesterday. We're going to edit that out right there. And it was back in the 70s, and I was perplexed half the time. I was extremely worried that I was not doing the right thing for the master in the church. And so as a result, I stumbled, and all the things that I did were not done correctly. They were done half-heartedly because I was fearful and worried that I would do something wrong and thereby stop the flow of the work that was going on and create some trouble. So this went on for a short period of time, I think. And one day, Master King allowed me to go on a walk with him, which was a traditional event here at night. About 10 o'clock, he would take his dog, Sandy, and put her on a leash, and he had elected 1 or 2 men, or sometimes 3 men, to walk with him for about 20 minutes, an evening stroll at 10 o'clock. And during that time, I would be quiet because the master needed to speak first, and I was very apprehensive, and I was apprehensive. And he said to me, out of the blue, he said, Richard, he says, you need to act, and then when you act, you shall become that which you act. And I thought for a moment, what did he mean by that? And then, of course, I contemplated on this, I thought about it deeply, and I said, aha. And then he said the next day he said, right, he says, now, I want you to do this. He gave me an assignment to do. And it took a man of a different experience pattern that I had, but I remembered what he said. He said, act, and then you'll become that which you act. And so I put on this false bravado, this false personality of assurance, and I knew what I was talking about. To a degree I did, but I was young in those days. And I went about the task at hand I was given, and lo and behold, the people that were around me that I related to took me as being confident, number one. Number two, when I came back to report that the issue or the job that was needing to be done was done successfully, and he praised me, he said, very good, what did you learn? I says, well, I acted. And I didn't have that experience, but I acted, and it went over well. So I guess the point of this story is that from my personal experience, I learned something very vital that carried on throughout the years, that I learned that strength, if you're weak, you can think strength in yourself and you will have strength. If you if you need inspiration, then think for inspiration. Think inspiration. Inspiration comes to you. In other words, we are the creators of our conditions. And so at the beginning of any circumstance, as we grow, learn to understand our evolutionary path through the 9 freedoms, then we learn that imaging, picturization, is vitally important to success. Very important to our success. And negative thoughts, negative images, acceptance of anyone else, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, I don't care who they are, as they may say something to you that sticks on your mind that you're not this and you can't ever be that. Don't accept it. Rebuke it. Take it as an attack. Don't attack them. Pray for them. But go back to yourself and say, I am this, and continue your constructive day and formulate your days and weeks and months and plan. And we'll go into predetermination here soon.
That would be next. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
The fourth freedom, enlightenment.